Hey guys, in this video I want to preview the men's quarterfinal matchups at the 2024 Wimbledon Championships, and I also want to use the example of Paul versus Alcaraz to explain why it's not always up to strengths and weaknesses when it comes to matchups. There are a lot of other factors to consider. All right, let's start at the top. We got Sinner against Medvedev in the first quarterfinal. Dimitrov pulled out. Medvedev is getting more and more comfortable on the grass. However, I think Sinner is going to come through that one. On the bottom, we have Alcaraz against Paul. I'm going to go in-depth previewing that matchup. On the top, we got Musetti against Fritz. Musetti is playing an amazing grass court season. However, I'm sticking with my pick. Fritz will make the semifinals. He played a very strong match against Zverev, coming back from 2 sets to love down. On the very bottom, we have De Minaur against Djokovic. De Minaur is putting together a phenomenal season. However, I'm predicting Djokovic to comfortably win this match. Djokovic is getting better in each round. Rune currently is not playing his best tennis. He's suffering from a lack of confidence, but still, Djokovic, with a knee that's not 100% fit, was able to dismantle Rune in straight sets very comfortably. I think the matchup between Paul and Alcaraz is a super interesting one because on paper, Alcaraz is the favorite, and I'm going to go through all their strengths and weaknesses to explain why Alcaraz is the better player. However, Paul plays Alcaraz really well. He beat him twice. The last time they played was in Cincinnati in 2023, and Alcaraz barely won that match. And this is the fascinating thing about tennis, because it's not always about strengths and weaknesses. Other factors that can determine the outcome of a match is the weather. Maybe a certain player doesn't like to play under certain conditions. Maybe another player plays extremely well under certain conditions. The surface that the match is being held on is of course a huge factor in determining who's going to be the favorite. Confidence is also a huge factor when it comes to matchups. Let's say player A has a 5-0 record against player B. However, player A is on a 5-match losing streak and player B is on a roll and won 5 matches in a row. Now the 5-0 record is less relevant, and player B has a good chance of beating player A. Also, some players don't like to play lefties, and despite the fact that one player might have a much better ranking, they might have a tendency to always struggle against lefties. Often on the WTA Tour, we see players struggle against opponents who hit with a lot of variety. But on top of all this, there's another factor that has to be taken into consideration when two players meet each other, and that is whether one player has a mental block against the other player. I'm going to give you an example of two players with a discrepancy in level and rankings that's going to explain why some players have mental blocks. So, in the early 90s, Goran Ivanišević was on the top of the tennis world. He was number 1 in Croatia. The number 2 guy in Croatia was Goran Prpić, a great player. However, nowhere near Ivaniševic's level. Now, when you look at the head-to-head record, Prpić leads 4-2 versus Ivanišević. Now, Prpić was really good on clay courts, and you might think, okay, maybe Prpić was beating Ivanišević on clay. No, Prpić beat Ivanišević on hard court and even on indoor carpet. And the reason why Ivanišević had a mental block against Prpić was for the fact that Prpić was older and regarded as a top 2 player in Yugoslavia back then. So Ivanišević always had a lot of respect for Prpić, and that respect remained on the court even when Ivanišević was ranked in the top 5. Ivanišević psyched himself out of those matches. And now let's take a look at the strengths and weaknesses in the Alcaraz versus Paul matchup. So in the forehand department, I'm going to give Alcaraz the advantage. Of course, Tommy Paul has a great forehand as well, but Alcaraz's forehand is better. The same goes for the backhand. Tommy Paul has a great backhand, but I'm going to give Alcaraz the check mark in this department as well. How about the serve? Tommy Paul has a good serve. However, I'm again going to give the advantage to Alcaraz in the serve department. Now, how about the return of serve? Tommy Paul is a great defender, also a great returner, but Alcaraz is a phenomenal returner, and I'm going to have to give Alcaraz the advantage in the return department as well. How about the transition game, the net play? Again, I'm going to have to give Alcaraz the advantage. He is arguably one of the best transition players in the world. How about the feel category, the touch, drop shots, slices. Again, I'm going to have to give Alcaraz the advantage here. He has one of the best drop shots that we've ever seen. How about offense? The ability to put a lot of pressure on the opponent and hit very powerful, heavy shots and blow somebody off the court. Again, I'm going to have to give Alcaraz the advantage in this department as well. What about defense? Here, I'm going to give both players a check mark because defense is related strongly to movement. So in both of those departments, I'm going to give Tommy Paul and Alcaraz a check mark because Tommy Paul is one of the best movers on tour and one of the best defenders on tour as well. Now, I am predicting that Alcaraz is going to come through. This is the first time they are playing on grass. But for whatever the reason may be, Alcaraz struggles with Paul. It is very difficult to explain based on strengths and weaknesses. This is the mysterious part of tennis. In the past, he has had somewhat of a mental block when he faced Tommy Paul. Now, of course, this is no disrespect to Tommy Paul. He's highly capable of producing huge results. He just won Queens. This guy's a phenomenal player. But we're talking about Alcaraz here, who has the potential to be one of the greatest players of all time. Let's see what happens.